Cassie Tarakajian is an educator, technologist, musician, and artist based in Brooklyn, New York. After receiving a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Johns Hopkins University, they focused their work on creative tools, working on the software Max MSP at Cycling 74 and joining the Processing Foundation in 2016 as the lead creator of the P5JS web editor. They also serve as an adjunct professor at NYU ITP, teaching creative coding workshops and classes. Their past artistic projects range from generating sonnets from Wikipedia articles to teaching computers how to love as a member of the band Lullabies for AI. Cassie Tarakajian.
Hi, everyone. Let's get this started. Thank you for the introduction, Golan. Hi, I'm Cassie. I use they, them pronouns, and as Golan said, I am a technologist, educator, and artist and musician. And for this residency at the Studio for Creative Inquiry, I have been continuing to work on the P5JS web editor, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but it's an in-browser code editor for creative coding in P5JS. And I've been working on this project for 5 years, and we'll talk a lot more about it. First, I want to talk about some of the other stuff that I do. So I am an educator. I'm an adjunct professor at ITP, and I also teach lots of workshops. So here's a picture of me teaching a Max MSP workshop, another creative coding tool that I like. I also like jokes. So here's an app that I worked on that tells you whether or not you're holding your phone. I also am interested in my own creative projects at the intersection of computing and art. So this is a project I worked on called Wikisonnet, which scans Wikipedia for sentences that were written in iambic pentameter and reassembles them into rhyming couplets to form Elizabethan sonnets. And what I think is fascinating about this project is that if you've ever tried to sit down and write like a sentence or phrase in iambic pentameter, which is a sequence of like stress, unstress, like syllables and words, it's like quite difficult, but we're accidentally doing it all of the time. So on Wikipedia, there's tons of these phrases, and this site is the intention is that it's purely informational, and I think taking the context from informational to poetic is interesting. I like that there are phrases in here. I won't read the whole thing, but like proposal for a hypertext project, like a sentence that is maybe not usually poetry, can be poetry. I also play music, and I'm interested in, caring for the AI children we will create in the future. So here's a sweet musical project I had about teaching our AI babies how to love. I'm also recently interested in like memes and this concept of like cursed content. I've been teaching this class this semester called Blessed/Blur/Cursed. That's about like, are memes important? Is cursed content important? I don't really have any answers, but all I know is that I really enjoy like saving these images and like letting it expand my mind. And it makes me feel things, and that's all I really know. Yeah, and I accept any. If you want to just email me memes, just at me on Twitter, please. I love memes. And I wanted to talk about like how I got into coding and art, and like how I started working on the P5 editor. Since now I've been working on it for 5 years, and maybe it seems sort of like, if you want to do something like that, like how do you do it, and like why is it important to me? So I want to give a shout out to this website called Neopets, which I think has been around over 20 years. But I started using the site when I was around 12 years old. And on the site, you can have like pets, you can make like a shop or like a home for them. You have like money, you can engage in like the stock market. There were like flash games on it that you could play. You could do quests and get items. There's like all kinds of stuff you could do. But one thing you could do is make a website for your pet. And the way that you would edit it is that they would give you this text box, which is like completely non-syntax highlighted, like HTML and CSS. So it was like you couldn't even have like a separate CSS page. And you would use this and you would make pages for your pet. I really enjoyed doing this. I unfortunately don't have any evidence of it because when I eventually logged back into my Neopets account many, many years later, it was like hacked and all my pets were gone and the web pages are attached to your pet. So I don't have that, but this was like my first experience coding, and I never really, especially when I was like 12, 13, 14, I didn't think of myself as a coder. And then I like went to undergrad and I studied engineering and had this experience of being more of a like what a professional software experience looks like. And I found that experience confusing because what I was doing was I was writing Java and C++ applications on the command line, and I would write these tools and it would like spit out numbers and phrases and whatever. I had to learn about all these complicated data structures, but I didn't really feel like I learned any more about how to make a website for my Neopet. So for me, there was this disconnect between like the technology I was working on and its purpose. And maybe now, many, many years later, I can feel like that disconnect is perhaps on purpose. But yeah, I felt like I just kept waiting for the moment when I would be like, oh, I see how these tools empower me. But I didn't feel that, and instead felt like I had to like keep learning stuff in order to be empowered. And so I like carried this with me when I moved forward in like software development, and just like ultimately felt dissatisfied until I learned about creative coding and the possibilities there. I learned about processing and P5 and was inspired that the goal was like learning as little as possible to like make something, whereas I felt like my engineering experience was like learn so much and like only then will you be able to make something. And I was inspired like that. So here's a screenshot from Lauren Lee McCarthy, the creator of P5, showing one of the first versions of P5, like how you could create a demo like in the middle of a talk. Whereas, when I was writing C++ applications, it'd be like, okay, let me compile my code on the command line and then I'll have an app that just like spits out numbers. Like this to me was super exciting. And also, a lot of my experience of like open source and tech tools was not that there were like women and like women of color leading these projects. So that was super inspiring to me. And also, I loved that P5 had this community statement. And that like the goal of this tool wasn't just let's make this awesome flashy thing, but like let's make something that aims to like include and empower people. I really love things like, no code snob, because we value community over efficiently. But I didn't even say that right, because we value community over efficiency. Like, that like in engineering school, it's just like, let's like optimize data structures and stuff. So this was just so inspiring to me. And I ended up applying for a Processing Foundation fellowship, and Processing Foundation is the foundation that manages all these different projects like P5.js, processing, and so on. And I didn't get it, but I sort of like stayed in touch and was like, I really want to be involved in P5 somehow. And, a few years back, there was this desktop editor for P5, which was supposed to be, similar to the processing desktop editor, where it was like an application you could download to write P5. But the issue is that often, you know, for example, if you're using it in an educational context, like schools have a hard time downloading software onto their computers, and you know, has to run on different operating systems. And this project was started by a person named Sam Levine, and so I was approached by Lauren Lee McCarthy and Dan Schiffman, and they were like, we have some funding from NYU ITP to start an online version of this. You know, the goal of the online version being it will increase access to P5. It's like you don't have to download or configure anything to start coding. You can just start working on it. And so that was, you know, at this point, 5 years ago. My first commit was apparently May 2nd, 2016, initial commit, which means that like my anniversary for this project is like, wow, like 3 days away. That's fun. And you know, when I started this, like I had just started doing web development, like maybe like a year and a half before. I wasn't super familiar. Had never led a project like this, had really wanted some independence. And yeah, I mean, I was excited about this opportunity, but felt very, very scared. I was like, how do these people know I'll do a good job? Like, I could just like do a terrible job. Like, what's gonna happen? And my goal at the beginning was like, let's just make something work. And I actually started teaching workshops with it within a couple months of it starting. Here's like a initial version that just, you know, would take code and render it, and you could save versions. I think on this version you couldn't even log in or anything. Maybe it's just cut off, I don't know. Yeah, you couldn't even like create an account. But I got it to this point where it just kind of worked, and then it was quickly used in some teaching settings at NYU and at UCLA and other places. And then it kind of like, as I kept working on it, more and more folks started using it. And in the sort of in fall of 2018, I did a like public release. And that was when I got it to a point that I felt like, you know, for a while I had it under the URL like alpha.editor.p5js.org. And I took off the alpha, you know, so it could be like an official beta release. And, you know, for me, this denoted a time that like, I felt like the project was stable enough. I felt like for a while I had to like hide it, and I didn't want it to be unstable and like have people rely on it, and then like have like the frustrating experience of it like being down. Like sometimes the site would be down and I would get like emails or texts from people, and I would just be like, oh no, like I'm doing a terrible job. But that's like that's software, I guess. It just like it happens. It's hard when you're like running a site on your own. But at this time, fall 2018, I feel like I got all of the hosting to a more stable place. I had to teach myself a lot about yeah, like DevOps and stuff. I had to learn like Docker and Kubernetes, and that was hard. But I did it, you know, I did it. And now, you know, it's in this place where I use it in teaching. Like here's a screenshot from me teaching a creative coding project, creative coding lesson at GitHub Universe about a year ago. And you know, Dan Schiffman also uses it on his YouTube channel, which has like 1.25 million viewers. So it's terrifying, or subscribers. It's terrifying that this project has so much reach. It's kind of unbelievable to me, but it's, you know, it's in a good place where like lots of people can use it, and that's really cool. And then after that, in 2019, there was a contributors conference, and this gave me an opportunity, I think, to connect with a lot of folks in the P5 community, and just like get a sense of like where I wanted to take this project and what my next goal was. And I was really inspired, first of all, by this like open concept of what it means to be a contributor in P5. Where for a long time, I thought that what it meant to contribute to an open source project was just code, and like you had to be this like technically elite person in order to work on it. And you know, in being the lead maintainer for the P5 editor, I've done so many other things besides coding. I've done like probably everything on this list, right? I've done teaching, documentation, making art, writing, design, activism, curating, bug reporting, organizing, outreach, and more. I've done the and more, whatever that means. Yeah, so I am continually inspired by this, and it was really great to meet at this conference like lots of folks who do contribute in all of these different ways. And I was also inspired by this idea that came out in from the conference. And the idea here was that P5 was reaching a point where we wanted to have like a 1.0 release that was like, this is officially out into the world. This is like the stable version, similar to like the public release of the P5 editor. And this idea that like P5 will not add any new features except those that increase access defined as inclusion and accessibility. I love this, and I loved that a goal of a technical project could be just including more people. You know, I think again my like technical background had the goal had been very shifted, and this to me was really inspiring, that like now that I got it stable, like how do I prioritize what I want to work on next? And I'm sure you'll hear more about this from Evelyn, who like worked a lot on this idea of access defined as inclusion and accessibility. So some of the ways that played out was there's a Spanish translation by a person named Omar Verduga, and now there's they laid the groundwork to do translations. So now there's like a Hindi one, there's a Japanese translation of the editor, and I hope it keeps growing. There's also a push to have a mobile version of the web editor, which unfortunately is not finished and isn't like public facing yet, but I hope to get this done soon. We'll see. But that was by a person named Talis Griot. And now I'm thinking a lot about sustainability, and like I'm just going to read this old-ish tweet from Laura McCarthy where she asks, how do you make a volunteer-based open source project sustainable? Is it even possible? I really need some help figuring this out. Like, you know, open source has this history of being built on the expectation of free labor, right? And that leads to the only people having the free time and to work on open source be like cishet white men. And for P5, I want, you know, for the goal of the project to be including more people, making sure that many people feel supported. Sustainability to me looks like including being able to have more people, being able to pay people that aren't just cishet white men to work and build these communities. So I've been thinking a lot about what sustainability looks like. Also, in that like this project has huge reach. So this is just some data I pulled from like the last week. And so in the last week, just on editor.p5js.org, not even on like p5js.org, just the editor, there were 232,000 users, which is like a huge number that I like can't really wrap my head around. And many of them in India. And, you know, India, Brazil, I guess we got Canada here, Japan, Germany, so around the world. And, you know, there's also 4.5 million sketches that have been uploaded. And right now there's around 672,000 registered users. Like, honestly, I made this slide like a week ago and it's probably bigger now. So I don't know where it's at. And the whole time it's been supported by volunteers and grants and donations. And it's been free of cost, but it's not free to maintain. Not only does it cost money to like host it, because like cloud computing or whatever is not free, like it costs money to host it all on all these different services. But it also, there's the cost of contribution labor, whether that's software development or design or building community. And so I'm going to read a quote from Lauren as well, if I can figure out how to move this Zoom window so I can read the whole thing. And, I can't move it. So I'm just going to try to guess what it says, the words that are cut off. It says, for me, sustainability means not just preserving the people in charge, but also extending the opportunity to work on it to people who would love to be part of the project if we could provide a means of access. So what Lauren is saying here is like, not only is it about like paying the people who are who are currently in charge of maintaining these tools, but also that, sustainability is like directly linked to access. So yeah, I'm thinking a lot about that. And the other thing I'm thinking about is like, how do we get institutions who use P5, who use P5.js, who support, wait, I didn't even think I phrased the sentence right. So I'm just going to say what is in my head now that I'm reading this again. But it's like, how do we get institutions who use P5.js, who can support us monetarily, to support us monetarily, while still making sure that P5.js is accessible and inclusive. And yeah, it's like there are many institutions who use P5 that, like universities and many institutions, other tech companies that can support us, but like there's not currently a way, we kind of just have like a donate, and that doesn't really communicate the value, or it's not really like a direct ask of like, we need money because the building software takes labor and labor is money. So there are different avenues to approach this, which could be bigger grants or more donations or other. And this is like what I'm trying to figure out right now. Like at the current rate of expansion of P5 and the number of people who like keep using it, like how do we support that? Yeah. And eventually I would like to replace myself, because I've gotten so much out of this project, and I think many others deserve to be empowered in the same way that I have been. So recently, through the fellowship at the studio, I had a mentee, Connie Yi, and she worked on an automated testing guide, which was really awesome because I know nothing about automated testing. You may think that the P5 editor is like a professional site by a person who really knows what they're doing, but I don't know everything about web development. I don't know everything about making a online code editor. And one of the things I don't know about is automated testing. So Connie has been helping me figure that out and has done an amazing job supporting me. And I've learned so much from her, and I really appreciate it. And the last thing I want to say is really like open my heart to you, whoever you are, to contribute. Just want to like emphasize that you don't need to have any special skills if you're like interested in contributing and being part of this community. Like, you are welcome, and I hope that you feel supported and heard. There were many things I felt scared of when I started contributing, and felt like I didn't know, and felt like I should have known. And like I've only been met with like support, and I'm so grateful for that, and I hope that others can feel empowered in the same way to join, and like I hope that this community can make many others feel empowered. So I just want to thank all of you, especially to the studio and like my peers in this fellowship, for your endless support. I really appreciate it. You can reach me in many different ways if you would like to get in contact with me. And that's all I got. So thank you.
And thank you, Cassie. Thank you so much. Stick around for a second. We've got just a couple comments and questions, perhaps. First, I mean, I'm reminded in seeing your presentation about the kind of double conundrum of working both in the arts and open source. Like, there's no money in the arts, there's no money in open source, and we're choosing to kind of work at the intersection of both. And yet, there's something that's really special that needs to be communicated to, I think, donors and funders. And I think you make this clear. Software that you're developing, and you're the lead developer, and you've written 90% of it, perhaps, for the P5 editor, for example, that more than 500,000 artists around the world demonstrably are using your software. Every dollar in to supporting the work that you're doing through the Processing Foundation, for example, goes back out to the Commons, not 1,000-fold, but nearly 1,000,000-fold. This is astounding. And supporting the arts, right, by supporting you to make sure that you can work on produce these tools. Something that also really struck me, the spirit of Lauren McCarthy is heavy in this talk. And I was reminded about how when she first was talking with Casey and Ben about, the need for a browser-based, JavaScript-based version of processing, that they were like, well, why don't you just go ahead and do it? And she was like, what? Me? I've never directed an open source, project before. And that story had a kind of a rhyme in your own experience where they said to you, well, why don't you just go ahead and make the editor, and you're like, what? And even your experience with our student Connie at Carnegie Mellon, where you're like, okay, let's do some, some testing and validation. And Connie's like, what? And I think it's really important that people's experience doesn't always mean that, not qualifications are not entirely always based on what you've done before. You have to start somewhere, and it's great to give people a kind of an opportunity to start somewhere with a really meaningful task if you know that you've got someone who's responsible and committed. There's a couple quick questions in here. Maybe I'm just gonna, what might support look like for students and others who may want to support in terms of a few hours per week?
I mean, there's a lot of different things. I mean, like one place to start is on GitHub and like looking at issues and seeing if you can pick one up. But it can also just be like using these tools is supporting. Finding bugs is supporting. Like making bug reports is a great way to support. Doing translations, documentation, tutorials. Yeah, those are some good ways to start.